incredible economic disruption. Industries are being disrupted. Media, where I work, has been completely disrupted. Teaching in universities are being disrupted. But I think, given our focus today, talent is being disrupted. You know, in the past, when I was growing up, talent meant attracting low-cost labor, typically to a factory. And talent really was an important factor of production. You competed based on cost. You competed on labor cost. You competed on efficiency. But, you know, in the past 20 or 30 years, our economy has gone through an incredible trend. I believe, folks, that this is the greatest single economic transformation in human history. For all of human history before us, from the inception of Florida to the birth of the United States, to the birth of human civilization, we grew our wealth and we grew our communities based on two factors. Early on, it was who had access to the best natural resources, who had the most fertile soil, who had the best game they could catch, who had access to the best natural ports and harbors that could undergird trade. Oh, and then several centuries ago with the Industrial Revolution, we added manufacturing and industry and capital to the mix. Now the cornerstone of competitiveness was who could build the biggest factories, who could have the largest vertically integrated corporations, who could attract the most low-cost labor. Land, labor, and capital were the factors that governed our competitiveness. But in the past several decades, the nature of economic competitiveness has changed, fundamentally. Across the United States today, and Florida is a big agricultural state, 100 years ago, more than 50% of our workforce in the United States were involved in agriculture. Today, about 1% of our workforce produces all the food that we eat. 50 years ago, about 50% of our workforce was involved in manufacturing. Today, 5 or 6% of our workforce produce the factory goods that we consume. We have seen a shift to a new kind of talent, a new kind of economy. Over these past 3 or 4 decades, we have moved from a resource and manufacturing economy, from an industrial economy, to a post-industrial economy, a knowledge economy, a talent economy, or what I call a creative economy. Over the past 30 years, we've grown 20 million jobs in this talent-laden, highly innovative, knowledge-based, creative sector of the economy. Today, more than 40 million Americans do creative work. And when I say creative work, I don't mean just arts and culture and design, although those are critically important sectors of our economy that are not just an afterthought. They drive economic growth. Science and technology, a core element of our innovative and creative economy. Science and technology, entrepreneurship, startup companies, business management, the professionals, education, healthcare, and the law. Today across America, more than a third of our workforce participates in this talent-driven creative economy. That third of the workforce generates more than half of all wages and salaries, $2 trillion in economic activity, and more than 3/4 in domestic purchasing power. The places that attract and build this creative economy, that attract and win and retain talent, are the winners, the places that don't lose. I learned this the hard way living in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, a city that I love. I taught at Carnegie Mellon University for nearly 20 years, a leader in innovation, competitive with MIT and Stanford in producing high-tech startup activity. My colleagues, almost to a person in computer science and engineering, took up jobs in Apple or Microsoft or Google. They were the directors of research and development. My students left Pittsburgh to be part of the technology revolution occurring in the San Francisco Bay Area. What stimulated me to write my book was when one of our best startup companies left Pittsburgh to move to Boston, not because of tax incentives, not because of lower costs. Real estate costs were higher, tax costs were higher, labor costs were higher in Boston. But because the talent they needed to grow their business was not in Pittsburgh, but in Boston. And fortunately, Pittsburgh has worked hard over the past 20 years to turn that around. Talent is the key differentiator in competitiveness. Now, right here in Florida, like the United States, there's great variation in the ability to attract and win in the talent game. And people hear me talk about the creative economy, and they say, well, that is really biased towards big, thriving cities and metropolitan areas, like the San Francisco Bay Area, like New York City, like Los Angeles. And there's no doubt that those places are big winners in the talent game. The world, I say, is not flat. In the words of Tom Friedman, the world of talent attraction is spiky. Talent clusters in great places, around great people, where other talent and economic opportunity is. You know, we live in Florida right now. We are in one of the largest economic aggregates in the world. It's hard to get specific statistics on the real nature of economic activity in the world. Statistical agencies collect data on nation states, on income and GDP, but they don't collect data on the real economic aggregates, our cities and metropolitan areas, and what I call the mega regions. So working with a team of computer scientists, we took those satellite images from NASA of the world at night, the reflected lights that are coming off that you see when you travel in a plane, and we determined where the world's economic epicenters are. There are 200 nations in the world. We identified 40 economic epicenters, cities, metropolitan areas, and mega regions. The great New York, Boston, Washington corridor, the largest in the world, $2 trillion in GDP, 50 million people. The Chicago, Detroit, Pittsburgh, Cleveland axis. The area around London, around Tokyo, around Seoul. It's not China that's our new competitor. It's the axis from Beijing to Shanghai. It's not India. It's the corridor from Mumbai to Bangalore. It's not Brazil. It's the Rio-Sao Paulo corridor. Well, we are in one of the top dozen megalopolis in the world. This axis that runs from Orlando to Miami on the east and Tampa on the west. 15 million people. $750 billion in economic activity. We are today in an economic city nation state that is bigger than the size of the Netherlands. So Florida has size and scale to compete, but I want to assure you this isn't just about size and scale. When I look at the talent epicenters of the world economy and the US economy and the Florida economy, while large regions and large cities do have advantages, they can offer more, they have more things to do, they have more size and scale, small places can compete and win. Ann Arbor, Michigan competes at one of the highest levels with San Francisco and Austin, Texas, ahead of New York, even though it's in the shadow of Detroit. My wife is from Detroit, one of the most hard-pressed, talent-draining regions in the country. In Florida, leading regions for creative class talent, number one is Tallahassee, 40% of its workforce in the creative class. Number two is Gainesville, 39% of its workforce in the creative class, far ahead of its larger cities like Tampa, Miami, and Orlando. They're in the 30 to 33% range, around the national average. Now, to compete and win in the creative economy, to attract talent, to grow thriving regions, to get those startup companies, to power and make your economy more productive, I have a simple equation. I call it the 3 T's of economic development. The first T is obvious, and Florida has been doing this for a long time, investing in companies, investing in great universities like the one I'm associated with here, FIU, and many others. You have to be a technology leader. But what I saw in Pittsburgh was a place that was a technology leader, that was producing startups and innovations, but those startups and innovations, when I was there, were leaking out to the Bay Area, to Austin, Texas, to Boston, to New York, and other places. One thing that's important to recognize today is that in order to have a strong startup and technology culture, it's no longer good enough to have great suburban office complexes. We associate startups in the past with great office centers that I call them the Nerdistans of Silicon Valley, where engineers want to go and not be bothered with the hurly-burly of urban life. But the research we have done shows a massive shift of startup activity to urban centers. Downtown San Francisco is the largest center of startups in the world economy today, producing several $1 billion worth. Lower Manhattan and New York City is number 2, both ahead of Silicon Valley. And much of the startup activity in my part of southern Florida, in the greater Miami corridor, is happening in the urban centers like Wynwood and adjacent areas of downtown. You have to have technology, but technology can leak away. You have to be a talent winner. Topic of today's conversation. You have to be able to produce talent with good schools, but having good schools isn't good enough, because educated people can and do move. You have to be able to retain the talent you create, and most importantly, you have to be able to attract talent. Here's where Florida has a huge advantage. But the third T is the one most people discount, and I'm here to tell you it's critically important. You heard the previous speaker talk about the importance of including people with disabilities. Talented people come in all shapes and sizes. We're able-bodied and we're disabled. We're black, we're white, we're Latino, we're Hispanic, we're Asian. And I've done the research on the creative class composition by ethnicity and race. We're gay and we're straight. We're married, we're single. We come in every kind of combination. It's not enough to have a place that's good for the traditional Leave It to Beaver family like we thought 30 years ago. Talented places have to compete on diversity, open-mindedness, and tolerance. That is why our research finds conclusively that places that are open to immigrants, sorry, Donald Trump, I had to get that in, places that are open to immigrants. Look at Florida. What has powered the United States? It's not our market size. It's not that we have American ingenuity. It's that we were the place that immigrants from all over the world, like my Italian grandparents, came for opportunity. From Andrew Carnegie and Steel to Andy Grove, a Hungarian in semiconductors. Immigrants power. Half of those companies in Silicon Valley were built and started by someone who wasn't born here. Places that are open to the artistic and creative community, where artists, musicians, designers, so-called bohemians want to come and live, like San Francisco, which had an avid music scene before it had technology, like Austin, Texas, like Seattle, Washington. The places that are home to artistic and cultural creativity have the climate in which technological entrepreneurs and talent thrive. Our gay and lesbian index, which has caused me more criticism and consternation, but what we found conclusively and empirically is places that are open to the gay and lesbian community also get an advantage in talent, innovation, and economic growth because of the kinds of places where entrepreneurs, different thinking, outside the box, different looking. When I did my first studies of San Francisco Bay Area and its technology, I interviewed all the original wave of venture capitalists. And I asked the venture capitalist who founded and invested in Apple Computer how in the world he could invest in two young hippies with a Volkswagen microbus, ripped jeans, and no shoes, called Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak. And he told me something that changed my life. He said, Richard, it's not the shell that matters. It's what's inside the shell. And this is a great advantage of Florida. It's a place that has welcomed in migrants. It is a place that has had enormous immigration, especially from South and Latin America, but not exclusively. If I look at the region in Florida I live, in fact, I split my time between the two most diverse and open-minded city regions in the world. One is Toronto, which has nearly half its population composed of people in four more. And the other is Greater Miami, which has just slightly more, a slightly greater percentage. Those are not just things that are social goods or ethical goods, and they're certainly not a cost. They're a driver of economic growth. Well, if you've heard me talk about the creative economy, and we think it's about arts and culture and music, it is, but it's about more than that. I learned this from my dad. My dad's name was Louis Florida. He was born in 1921 in the heart of the Great Depression. My dad fought in the great battles of World War II, and he worked in an eyeglass factory making eyeglasses just like these for more than 50 years. He made age 13 when he got his working papers to age 65 when he retired. And on Saturday, I would beg my dad, would you take me to the plant? Would you show me where you work? He said, Richard, it's my job to work in a factory. It's your job to get an education, to get ahead. But I would relent. I wouldn't relent. I would beg him. And we'd take a drive. By the way, that drive looked just like the drive at the opening of The Sopranos. And I grew up Italian American, so I talked like, how you doing? Hey, Orlando, this is a nice place, Florida Chamber. I went to college at Rutgers. I learned English as a second language. We'd enter that factory. And there would be German workers working machines, and Italian, and Latino and Hispanic, Puerto Rican workers, African American workers. My dad would see me fascinated by the factory technology, and he'd say, Rich, It's not the machines that make this place great. It's the knowledge, it's the intelligence, it's the creativity of the people who work here. You see, the creative economy includes agriculture. Think about the shift in agriculture in America from a commodity good to an artisanal good. High-value cheese, high-value wines, I could go on and on and on. How we've transformed agriculture from a commodity to more of an artisanal product. Manufacturing. If you look at the manufacturing that's growing in America, it's all kinds of very upscale, artisanal, craft-based, high-end manufacturing. But I want to talk about one last thing that's key to our economy going forward. And we don't think of it enough as a talent-driven sector. A third of our workforce works in a talent-driven creative economy. About 20% of our workforce, and declining, still works in the blue-collar part of our economy, most of that in construction and transportation. Only 5 or 6% in manufacturing. But in the United States, half. And in Florida, 56% of our workforce are people who help us, serve us, and take care of us. They're the people who get us around this hotel, who cook our food, who we go and we shop and we buy things off in retail stores, who give us a massage when our backs ache, take care of our children, take care of our aging parents when they're sick, help us out, are the staff in our hospitals, are undergirding our tourism and hospitality industry. These people make less than a third of what a talent, creative class worker makes, less than a half of what a factory worker makes. My dad told me, though, I had a crappy job in a factory when I started in 1934. When I came back from the war, Rich, we in America turned factory work. We turned factory work through the New Deal, through legislation, through our corporations, far-sightedness, through Henry Ford saying that people who work in this factory need to be able to afford cars. We turned factory work from terrible, low-paying jobs. It took my father and his family 9 working people, my grandmother, my grandfather, my father, and 6 siblings to make a living wage. My dad came back from World War II and he went back to work in the same factory. He could buy a house in the suburbs and put myself and my brother through college. We cannot run a sustainable, talent-driven economy with a depressed and suppressed service sector. And Florida is the place to take the first step here. It's happening in cities like San Francisco. Eric Garcetti's leading the charge in Los Angeles, the mayor. It's happening in Toronto. But there's no better place to create innovation and creativity in the service economy than here. The research out of MIT shows this conclusively. Just like higher paid manufacturing workers are more engaged in their work, are more innovative, are much more involved in quality, who develop those new continuous production techniques, who revolutionize factory work. The research out of MIT shows conclusively that companies that invest in service workers pay them more, get them involved in quality, see them as a source of customer engagement, have higher productivity and higher profits. Florida has many things to compete on. We've developed a talent-driven economy. It's not quite at the upper tiers, but it's getting stronger. It's important that we upgrade the service economy if we want to build a fully sustainable economy. And we have an important lever to do it. You know, it's true that people no longer move to a place for a job, and that's what's driven Florida's growth. Even when jobs have not been as abundant here as they might be, people increasingly, especially talented and creative people, move to places they want to be in. It's not just about quality of life. It's about creating a great people climate that's open to everyone, regardless of age, gender, sexual preference, orientation. It's about leveraging quality of place. I gave a talk at the opening of the new Frank Gehry New World Symphony several years ago in Miami Beach. And the person who designed that stage with Frank Gehry and did the exteriors and the park around that, he was a Dutchman, and he said, with great sunshine, with great weather, with great beaches, with warmth all year round, how can you not compete for talent? In a time where quality of place, the ability to offer a place, a set of assets that people want to be to, Florida has a great abundance. Anyway, it's been great spending time with you. It's great being able to talk about this. I wish you the best of luck in your deliberations, and I'll be around for a while if you want to talk to me, but if you can't, my email is easy to remember, florida@creativeclass.com. Thank you very much.